Alright, so today's the day we're actually gonna go over suspended chords. I've been saying it for a while now and it's finally happening. So we're actually going to be going over diatonic suspended chords, which is really just all the suspended chords that we can use in a major key. And they could be used in the natural minor key, natural minor scale as well. I don't want to use the word minor key because I've already talked about there's some additional notes there. There could be some additional suspensions that could happen. But let's just think about it from the major scale. So one of the reasons why I find these so useful is that they're great chord substitutions. When writing and when composing, I love having chord substitutions. There's many different techniques you can use to derive these chord substitutions, but I may make a video on negative harmony next, which is another way that I derive chord substitution. The negative harmony specifically will give you sort of non-diatonic chord choices, so you can incorporate modal mixture or borrowing. But this method is just entirely diatonic. We're just saying, okay, if I've got a 6 chord, let's say, what are the sus chords that I could substitute instead of just playing the typical minor or minor 7 chord that goes with the 6 chord? So suspended chords can be a great addition to your songwriting toolkit. They create an airy, open sound that can really evoke emotion. They're a staple of film scoring, but have been used in popular music for a long time as well. The name of these chords comes from the lack of the third. That would be the major third or the minor third. We can call that 3 or flat 3, which is then replaced with a second or a fourth. The third has been suspended. This makes these chords neither major or minor, but neutral. For the construction of these chords, let's take a C major chord, C, E, G. Now to construct the sus2 version, we'll simply change that E that was in the middle there to a D. Voila! C sus2, C, D, G. And for the sus4 version, we would just change the E to an F, leaving us C sus4, C, F, G. More about how these chord shapes relate on guitar will follow. That is definitely true. In the next section we'll actually hit some shapes and I'll show you where you can employ these. Now we want to know when and where we can use these chords to spice up a progression. Below I've spelled every possible incarnation while they're still remaining in key, diatonic. Though this example uses the key of C, the same information follows to any major key provided you know which scale degree, Roman numeral, you are playing on. Notice that certain scale degrees, 3, 4, 7, have trouble making some of these suspensions using the major key. And this is because these degrees have intervals like flat 2, can't make a sus2, sharp 4, can't make a sus4, or flat 5, can't make either of them because you need the perfect fifth to make a sus2 or sus4 chord. Well, it doesn't mean we can't use these chords ever, and there it just has the 4 chords in relation to the key of C that we're talking about. These would be the 4 chords we're saying you can't play and actually be in the key of C still. But it is important to realize that it is at the expense of stepping out of the key, non-diatonic chord. Okay. So it's just saying there are no rules in music. You can use those chords if you want. It's just important to know that you will be stepping outside of the key if you do that. So if we look at them, we can see, right, we're in the key of C, so we're only using natural notes, right? No sharps or flats are allowed in any of these chords. So we end up on the first Roman numeral there, we can play a C sus4 or sus2, be a D or an F. That would be additionally added in there. On the second degree, we can also play a sus2, sus4. Now, on the third degree, we can see down there at the bottom that we have a flat 2. And this flat 2 stops us from being able to play a sus2, so we can only play a sus4 on the third degree of any major scale and remain in key. Alternatively, on the fourth chord, we have a sharp 4, so we can't play the sus4, but we have a natural 2, so we can play a sus2 on the 4th degree. Then 5 and 6, both possibilities are there. I'm speeding it up. And then on the 7th, we have a flat 5, so neither are possible within the key. So this leads to a mnemonic device that I use which is both, both, 4, 2, both, both, none. It's kind of like a little rhyme or something. Both, both, 4, 2, both, both, none. This just helps me to remember 1, 2, 5, and 6 can have any type of sus chord, but 3 and 4 have certain dietary restrictions, if you will, and then 7, you can't even put one on it and remain in the key. So then at the very bottom of this page, there's just a weird phenomenon that is important to be aware of as well. It's essentially that one sus chord is the inversion of another sus chord is the inversion of another 7 sus chord. And I'll just let you take a look at that graphic here for a second. We can just see that if we rearrange those, we're always getting some kind of sus chord out of it again. If you trace this through our key and you see that, okay, well the C sus2 is the 1 chord and the G sus4 is the 5 chord, so essentially the 1 and the 5 share that in relationship. So yeah, to say this differently, when someone plays a C sus2, we can't really say for sure that it's not a G sus4. Part of the naming conventions just comes from what is the lowest note being played, the bass note. Usually that would name the chord, but you could call a C sus2 a G sus4 with C in the bass, or G sus4 over C, and it'd be another way to write it. So it's just important to know that there is an inverse relationship. Every sus4 chord is another one sus2 chord. Now we're starting to go on to part 2 here. So on this second page, basically I lay out the best ways to get these sus chords rather quickly. Now I play a lot of bar chords more than I rely on open chords, but some of these can be used as open chords too. We'll see that. But so I think about using the low E string as a root, then using the low A string as a root, and then using the low D string as a root. Those are my 3 main roots essentially when I'm thinking about playing chords. So looking at some of those, essentially if let's say I'm in G major right now. So that's my 1 chord, okay? Now I could sub that out for a sus2 or a sus4 chord. So the very first one here is unfortunately a little bit tricky because we actually have to use some kind of hybrid picking to get those 4 strings. It's all about string selection. I can mute my A string pretty well. It's a little bit harder to mute my D string. I have to use my index finger here to do that, and I don't like the way it sounds as much as if I hybrid pick it. But it's up to you. It's still there. Just know that on your E string, if your low E is your root, it's just more difficult to play a sus2. Now if I wanted to make the same chord into a sus4, that one's not as hard. We're kind of thinking of the minor shape or even the major. We just need to move our major 3rd up a fret. So we end up with G sus4. Now this one can get used, this one comes from both of these obviously come from the E shape. If we're playing with our root on the low E, then we're calling this an E shape. So therefore, we could come down and play E sus4 there, right? You might even be used to using a pinky flick on that. You might have seen something like that before. That's using a sus4. Now for the A string root, let me jump down to this C chord here. So then I could play this one, sus2 shape, or I can throw my pinky out there farther and get a sus4. That is essentially what's going on in Free Fallin'. got that kind of thing. Then we go on to the D string now. So I'm gonna actually just jump back down to G here. Just pretend I'm playing my 1 chord in my mind. That way I can play a sus2 and a sus4 for it. So we got sus2, shape, and then we've got, if we bar our pinky down, we can get the sus4 shape. So then we just got to think about when to use these. The best way that I like to employ these is just already having a progression, but wanting something a little different or to inject a different feeling into it, and then I'll sub these sus chords out for one or more of the chords in the progression. So essentially, if we took something like, let's do the 4 chords of pop, you know, the Axis of Awesome progression. G, D, E minor, C. So let's keep the 1 the same, okay? Now we go to 5. 5 has both. So I could play a... Now I go to 6. 6 actually has both. I could play that one. And then let's go back to major. Something a little bit different there, you know. Almost a little dissonant, but it's something different to play with. So maybe we'd like that better. Maybe I'll put the sus4 on the 5 chord and put the sus2 on the 6 chord. Just gives you a slightly different feeling there. So now let's look at another progression. 1, 3, 6, 4. So on the 3, we know that we can use a sus4 shape. Now I could do that shape right there because it's a B sus4, or I could come find my B root on my A string here, and I could play a sus4 there too. That's the benefit of knowing both of your shapes. So there's a cool one. I like that a lot. G, B sus4. Then we got E minor, as is, and then we got C sus2. Let's take the old Boulevard of Broken Dreams one, Mad World, whatever you want to call it. 2, 4, 1, 5. Now the only one we actually have to watch out for here is the 4 chord as far as which notes we can add on it, but we know we can use the sus2 shape. So maybe... So you can get a little movement there. Another chord I guess I should mention, but I didn't write it down in here because so far we've only focused on triadic sus chords. But another type of chord is a 7 sus4, which is pretty common in certain types of music. A lot of, think of Earth, Wind, and Fire. So I play the sus4 version that we already were used to on the low E string root, but then I remove the ring finger. And now it's kind of weird because I got middle finger and pinky, so instead I'll just put my ring finger where my middle finger was. That way it feels a little more natural. So that's ring finger on the A string, pinky on the G string there, and then with a hole in the middle. You can hear Venus. You can hear the intro to Hard Day's Night. basically that chord. Now it was multiple people playing at once, but essentially they were making a sort of 7 sus4 chord. And then this one also likes to, the pinky steps down. So that one does the same thing that I was just doing. We do. But that's a great move right before you go back home to use on the 5 chord. It gets used on the 5 a lot. So hopefully this video gave you some ideas for how to sub suspended chords in for progressions you already have, and maybe gave you some new shapes to play them in that you might not have thought of before. Cool. Hope you have fun with that.